Xiaolu, it's almost time for you to clock out as well. Even though colleagues work overtime until midnight every single day, my boss actually begs me not to work overtime. The first time I worked overtime, Lowly at the desk next to me passed away from a sudden myocardial infarction. The second time I worked overtime, Brother Liu, my industry mentor, took a bad fall down the stairwell. The third time I worked overtime, the janitor suffered a severe electric shock inside the break room. After that, the entire company knew, whenever I stayed back to work overtime, someone was guaranteed to meet a grim fate. No one dared to work on the same floor as me anymore, so my workstation was relocated to a private, isolated room, and management even explicitly emphasized Liu Baimu's working hours, warning that absolutely no one was allowed to disturb me. Just like that, I comfortably kicked back, collecting a steady paycheck for 3 whole years, until that new executive director was officially appointed, Liu Baimu. When she called out my name, the entire conference room instantly plunged into dead silence. Stand up. I got my feet. She picked up the topmost document, giving it a flick. Working here for 3 years, and your total number of overtime shifts is absolute 0. She held up the paper for everyone to witness. 3 years, over 1,000 working days, and not a single overtime shift. Can anyone among you explain to me just how she pulls that off? Not a single soul dared to speak up. She stepped down from the podium, strode right up to my face, and stared me down. How is it that out of a company of over 100 people, you're the only one exempt from working overtime? Did you grow an extra arm compared to everyone else? Or is your workload literally half of what others carry? Director Ian, company policy states I have the right to refuse overtime. Policy? Let me make something crystal clear to you, starting from right now. This company has only one single rule, and that is my word. You're working overtime tonight. If you don't stay, don't bother showing up tomorrow. Director Ian, if I work overtime, someone's genuinely going to get hurt. The meeting room fell silent for a single second, before she burst into a mocking laugh. Once she finished laughing, she straightened her posture, pointed straight at me, and announced to the room. Did all of you hear that? He actually claims someone's going to get hurt. Liu Baimu, the guy who hasn't worked overtime in 3 years, claims that working overtime always gets someone hurt. She whipped her head back, leaning her face right up close to mine. Liu Baimu, let me make something abundantly clear to you. I, Ian Kai, have been grinding in the corporate world for over 20 years. What kind of freaks and ghouls haven't I seen before? What kind of fake ghost stories and pretenders haven't I crossed paths with? Today, no matter how much you talk your head off, you are staying back to work overtime for me. She took a step back, grandly declaring. At one more person. She pointed right at the head of security, who was cowering in the corner of the room. You are staying back tonight, too. And if anything goes wrong, the head of security's face turned completely pale. Director Ian, please don't make him stay. I'm terrified of dragging innocent people down with me. She paused for a split second. Bafura la winga en lode. Dragging people down? Who on earth do you think you are? Some kind of reincarnated plague god. She aggressively grabbed the head of security by the arm, dragging him right back over. Tonight, both of you are staying. I want to see just how miraculous your little plague, god curse, actually is. If someone genuinely gets hurt, I'll take full responsibility. The conference room fell completely silent. Meeting dismissed. Tonight at 7 p.m., Liu Baimu and the head of security must be present on the dot. Whoever doesn't show up needn't bother coming in tomorrow. She was dead certain I wouldn't dare quit my job, because I genuinely, desperately needed this paycheck. As everyone shuffled out of the room, the accountant walked past my desk, pulling me aside in a quiet whisper. His hands were ice cold. Baimu, be really careful tonight. I nodded. At 6, the head of security was already sitting at the front reception desk, a man in his 40s slouching in his chair. Seeing me walk in, he hurriedly scrambled to his feet. Brother Mu, his voice was trembling. Is something actually going to happen tonight? It'll be fine, just sit tight right there. No matter what you see. At 7 p.m. sharp, the elevator doors slid open, and Inki stepped out. Seeing me standing there. You actually showed up on time? I honestly thought you'd fake sick and call out. I didn't say a single word. She stepped right up to my face, looking me up and down. Liu Baimu, I've already run a background check on you. 3 years ago, right after you started working here, Someone on your floor passed away. Then it happened 2 more times. And every single time, it was when you were working overtime. Did you really think I'd actually believe that someone working overtime means someone else gets hurt? These kids, these days, always trying to reform the workplace environment. What an absolute joke. Director Ian, whether you believe it or not isn't important. Then what is important? What's important is that you're staying right here tonight, too. She scoffed and burst out laughing. Fine, I'll stay right here and watch. I want to see what kind of ungodly nonsense could possibly happen. She turned around and began walking toward her office door, but after a few steps, she spun back around. Lou Baimu, you stay put at your desk and revise that proposal for me. The door to my office will stay wide open, so I can keep my eyes on you at any second. I sat down and powered on my computer, while the head of security remained glued to the reception desk without twitching. Time ticked away second by second. At 7:30 p.m., the lights flickered once. The head of security raised his head to gaze at the ceiling, hard swallowing a mouthful of saliva. At 8 p.m., all the lights suddenly went pitch black. In the darkness, I heard Ian Kai let out a harsh curse from inside her office. 5 seconds later, the lights flickered back on as she stood at her doorway, her expression looking rather grim. The electrical wiring is old. Property management says they'll fix it right away. I remained silent. At 8:30 p.m., the elevator chimed, and the elevator doors slid open. There was no one there. Inky bolted out to take a look. Must be someone pressing the wrong button. She muttered, though her voice was clearly losing its steadiness. By 10 p.m., the proposal revisions were completely done. I packed up my belongings, preparing to take my leave. The moment I stepped out past the main gates of the company, a blood-curdling scream echoed from behind me, coming straight from Ian Kai's private office. I sprinted back inside. Ian Kai was slumped backward in her chair, her face as pale as a sheet of paper, her eyes dilated in pure terror. As a single trembling finger pointed toward the window, outside the window, while the head of security stood frozen by the doorway, his legs shaking uncontrollably. I walked over and gazed out the window, where absolutely nothing was there. I turned back to look at her. Her entire body was trembling violently, her mouth gaping wide, open without being able to squeeze out a single word. Director Ian, what on earth did you see? She stared straight at me, her eyes bulging even wider. A person. Her voice sounded as if it were being squeezed straight out of her throat, staring right at me. Who? Inky didn't answer, and even as she was being loaded into the ambulance, she kept screaming, Save me, there's someone. The head of security, standing right beside her, had his legs shaking so badly he couldn't even stand steady, having to lean against the wall just to keep from collapsing. I stood outside the gates of the company, watching the ambulance drive off into the distance. When I turned my head back, I caught a fleeting glimpse of 3 faint, hazy handprints pressed against the window glass. I stared at them for 3 seconds before turning around and walking away. The following morning, the moment I arrived at the company, the break room was as chaotic as a kicked-over beehive. The accountant was the first to rush over and grab my hand, his palms completely soaked in cold sweat. Did something happen again last night? Director Ian got hauled away. Could it be that someone got hurt again? No, she was just taken to the hospital. He let out a heavy, relieved sigh, but instantly lowered his voice. I told you so. Whenever you work overtime, someone gets hurt. It was exactly the same 3 years ago. Brother Wong from administration chimed in, his eyes wide open. Everyone tell me, could those people have actually come back? The break room abruptly fell into an eerie silence, with every single pair of eyes converging straight onto me. I remained silent, picking up my coffee cup to take a sip. Xiao Lu from the tech department stepped in. I don't think there's anything mystical about it. There's definitely some logical pattern to all this, like having a unique birth chart that makes it easy to attract certain things when working overtime. The accountant's eyes lit up. Right. Back in my hometown, there's a saying that certain people possess a heavy aura, making them extremely prone to spiritual clashes. Brother Wong from administration shook his head. That's not it. When Laoli passed away, I was also working overtime. So how come nothing happened to me? Then could it be a problem with the floor itself? The 12th floor has never been cleaned to begin with. and Brother Lou fell down the stairwell on the 13th floor. Someone chimed into the break room conversation, sparking a chaotic buzz, with all sorts of wild speculations flying everywhere. Some claimed my constitution was special, uniquely prone to attracting unclean things. Others argued that the position of my workstation was bad, accidentally sitting right on top of a malevolent death spot. Some even whispered that when the company constructed this building, something might have been buried beneath the ground. There were even those who secretly pulled me aside to ask, "Brother Moo, can you actually see things that others can't?" I looked at him without uttering a word. These speculations grew increasingly absurd, yet no one could ever explain why the people who met with misfortune did so at different times and locations, except for one single common denominator. Every single time I worked overtime, someone met a grim fate. The morning discussion went on forever without reaching any conclusion. The next day, after Ian Kai was discharged from the hospital, the very first thing she did upon arriving at the company was storm straight into the surveillance room, demanding to pull the full security footage from that night. The head of security accompanied her, reviewing every single frame. The elevator doors opened, but no one was there. I sat at my workstation drinking coffee and tapping away at the keyboard with nothing unusual happening. Ian Kai rewound and replayed that segment of footage over 10 times. That's all there was. Just that. She remained silent for a long time before standing up and walking out of the surveillance room. As I was sitting at my desk, I saw her walking straight toward me. "Lou Baimu, come to my office for a moment." I got to my feet, following her inside as she pulled the door shut and dead-bolted it from the inside. Then she spun around and stared straight daggers into me. "Who on earth are you?" I stared right back in her eyes. "I'm simply who I am." "Director Ian, that's impossible." She took a step closer. "You definitely know something." That night I clearly saw. Saw what? Her lips twitched, but she couldn't force the words out. "Director Ian, what exactly did you see?" She still refused to speak. I offered a faint smile and turned to walk out. From behind me, Ian Kai's sharp voice rang out. "Lou Baimu, you stop right there." I ignored her, and right after that, she called for an emergency company meeting. She stood up on the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, over the past few days, a few rumors have been floating around the company, and I've heard every single one of them." She swept her gaze across the room. "As for the incident where I had to be hospitalized, it was entirely an accident. That night, I was simply too exhausted and hallucinated, scaring myself over nothing." Someone softly scoffed. She pretended not to hear it. "The company is returning to normal operations, and whoever needs to work overtime can go right ahead and do so." She fixed her eyes squarely on me. "Lou Baimu, you will continue working overtime tonight." I stood up. "Director Ian, I refuse." The conference room plunged into dead silence. She chuckled. "Refuse? Why do you think you have to refuse?" "Director Ian," I enunciated each word clearly, "I don't want anyone else getting hurt or forced to leave." Getting hurt? Didn't someone work overtime yesterday without a single person getting hurt? I only suffered from extreme fright. Your little curse that working overtime always gets someone hurt can now be considered completely debunked. I looked at her without a word. Inside the meeting room, a few people sneered and whispered among themselves. This time, no one really got hurt. Director Ian is still completely healthy, and the head of security is still completely healthy too. Could the rumors really have been fake all along? Right at that exact moment, a shrill scream abruptly echoed from outside the door. It was Brother Wong from the administration department. His face was completely drained of color, his finger trembling as he pointed toward the shadowy corner next to the break room, his entire body violently shaking. Over there." Everyone turned to look in the direction of his pointing finger. That corner was piled high with random junk. A few cardboard boxes and a discarded water dispenser. Protruding from behind the cardboard boxes was a single hand, a stark bone-white hand. Chaos instantly erupted in the conference room. Some people shrieked in terror. Others bolted for the exit, and a few collapsed onto the floor with jelly-like legs. Ian Kai's face turned instantly ashen, yet she forced herself to take a shaky step forward. "Don't panic. Everyone, don't panic. Call 911. The police arrived in a flash, cordoning off the entire crime scene, while everyone on the floor was evacuated down to the lobby. I stood quietly amidst the crowd, watching the flashing police lights. 2 hours later, the news was finally leaked out. The victim was an employee from the technical department, named Wang, who usually spoke very little, and had a near-zero presence. Preliminary forensic judgment pointed to a sudden heart attack, with the exact cause awaiting autopsy results. However, the time of passing was already confirmed. It was precisely the night I worked overtime. The crowd erupted into absolute pandemonium once more. He passed away yesterday. Then wasn't it the night Liu Baimu worked overtime? Oh my God. He was inside the company that night, and that corner was so hidden that nobody even noticed him. I stood motionlessly right in the middle of the crowd, while the people surrounding me instinctively backed away, carving out a wide, empty space around me. Someone whispered, Liu Baimu works overtime, and someone actually dies. This time, the person who met his fate was from his very own department. I raised my head and looked straight at Yin Qi not far away. I waded through the crowd and stepped right up in front of her. Every single person was watching my every move. I stood still and locked eyes with her. Director Yin, she flinched and took a step back. Do you still want me to work overtime? She didn't utter a word. I stared at her in silence for 3 full seconds before turning around and walking away. Behind me lay a deathly silence. Yet I knew this matter was far from over. Sure enough, 3 days later, Yin Qi called yet another meeting. She stood up on the podium, her complexion looking even worse than before. Ladies and gentlemen, she began in a raspy, hoarse voice. Over the past few days, certain rumors have circulated around the company, and I have thoroughly investigated the matter. She paused for a fleeting moment. It was entirely an accident. The conference room plunged into dead silence. Not a soul believed her, but no one dared to speak up. She fixed her gaze directly on me. Liu Baimu, you will continue working overtime tonight. I stood up. Director Yin, didn't you hear a single word of what I said last time? She forced a cold, bleak smile that looked far uglier than weeping. I heard you, but the company needs you. Hearing that, I couldn't help but let out a sharp chuckle. Does the company need me to walk straight into the jaws of death? Or does it need more innocent people to suffer? Inside the conference room, someone sharply sucked in a cold breath of air. She took a step forward. Liu Baimu, for all these years, you haven't worked a single overtime shift. Yet not a single penny of your salary has ever been shorted. The company has fed and sheltered you for so long. And now that you're being asked to work a little overtime, you make excuse after excuse. Do you really think everything in this world is so mystical and supernatural? Director Yin, I enunciated every single word with absolute clarity. Whenever I work overtime, someone meets a grim fate. Wang's tragedy from just a moment ago. Have you already forgotten it? Her face twitched. That was entirely an accident. The forensic examiner already confirmed it was a sudden heart attack. His passing had nothing to do with you. So stop overthinking things. Is that so? I looked straight into her eyes, and she stared right back. Tonight at 8 p.m., you are working overtime. Just the two of us staying behind. If anything happens, I take full responsibility. Can you really bear that responsibility? I can take full responsibility. I smiled. Very well. At 8 p.m. sharp, I arrived at the company. The entire floor contained only Yin Qi and myself. Yin Qi sat directly across from me, her eyes unblinking, staring intently in my direction. Get to work, she commanded. I didn't budge an inch as time ticked away second by second. At 8:30 p.m., the lights flickered once. Yin Qi snapped her head up to glare at the ceiling, saying nothing. At 9 p.m., a faint noise echoed from the far end of the hallway, sounding as though something had been knocked over. She bolted to her feet, rushed to the doorway, and peered outside. There was absolutely nothing there. She turned back around and sat down, her complexion looking far from well. Must be a stray cat. Must be, she muttered under her breath, as if desperately trying to reassure herself. Hearing her say that, I couldn't help but speak up. What are you scared of, Director Yin? Didn't you just say that nothing here is supernatural or mystical at all? She shot me a fierce glare. Just mind your own work. At 9:30 p.m., the elevator chimed. She stood up and marched over to the elevator doors as they slid open. Inside, there was not a single soul. She stood there frozen for 3 seconds before reaching out to press the close button. By the time she walked back, her forehead was already beaded with cold sweat. Must be someone pressing the wrong button, she muttered, though her voice had begun to tremble. At 10 p.m., she leaned back and lit up a cigarette. Lou, Baimu. She exhaled a plume of smoke. I've already investigated you. 3 years ago, right when you started, Lowly passed away. After that, every single time you worked overtime, something happened. She stared piercingly into my eyes. Did you do this on purpose? I chuckled. Director Ian, you can't just slap a terrifying accusation on someone like that. How could I possibly be some kind of malicious mastermind? She smiled, opening her mouth to say something else when suddenly, the lights inside the break room went completely pitch black. She bolted up, rushed out to check. The lights flickered back on as she stopped at the break room doorway and froze in place. I spoke up, Director Ian. What's wrong? She remained silent. I looked over and saw her face drained of all color, her finger pointing down toward the floor of the break room. There was a puddle of water on the ground, along with a trail of footprints leading out from that puddle, stretching straight toward the stairwell. Just a second ago, there was someone here just now. Her voice quivered uncontrollably. I said nothing, crouching down to inspect them. The footprints were still wet, as if they had just been left behind moments ago. Yet tonight, nobody else had come into the break room, aside from the two of us. She looked up at me. Lou Baimu, did you see that? I stood up and gazed down at her. Director Ian, aren't you the one who desperately wanted to know why every time I work overtime, someone meets a grim fate? Let me enlighten you. Ian Kui collapsed backward onto the floor, slumping like a pile of wet mud. I lower my head, looking down at her, and let out a cold sneer. Do you really think Wang's incident was just an accident? She snapped her head up instantly, her eyes wide with terror. What does Wang's passing have to do with me? When he died, I was still in the hospital. I pulled a set of documents out from my folder and tossed them right down in front of her. Wang's medical checkup reports, overtime logs, and even screenshots of the text messages he had sent to his wife 3 days before his passing, which he sent to his wife 3 days before passing away. Wang suffered from severe, advanced heart disease, which was documented crystal clear in the company's health checkup reports. I enunciated every single word. You forced him to work consecutive overtime shifts for an entire week, and he didn't dare refuse. By the time he passed away, he had been working continuously for 16 hours. I picked up the report and slammed it right against her face. This is the person you murdered. The fourth victim, she gasped, her mouth dropping open, utterly unable to squeeze out a single syllable. I pulled a voice recorder from my pocket and placed it on the table. 3 years ago, before Lowly passed away, he handed this to me. I pressed the play button, and her voice echoed out from the recorder, crisp and piercingly clear. These people are blocking my path. Find a way to clear them out and leave no trace behind. Her face turned instantly ashen as she lunged forward to snatch it back. I pulled my hand away, causing her to lunge and crash flat onto the floor. Lao Liso poison medicatin. Brother Lou's stairwell lights, the janitor's exposed power socket. Did you really think you covered your tracks so perfectly? I squatted down to look her in the eye. But you forgot one single detail. Before Lowly passed away, he spilled every single detail to me. She lay on the floor, trembling from head to toe as I hauled out a thick stack of documents from my bag, tossing them right in front of her. Bank transfer receipts, call logs, and duplicate testimonies from repairmen. You transferred $50,000 to the person who poisoned him, $80,000 to the one who tampered with the wiring, and $30,000 to the one who sabotaged the stairwell lights. She stared blankly at those documents for a long, long time before slowly lifting her head. Even if all of this is true, what about those handprints? What about the elevator malfunction? The flickering lights? What about those wet footprints from just a moment ago? She glared straight into my eyes. Those things certainly weren't engineered by me, were they? Tell me, how do you explain all of that? I looked straight at her, gazing into the final shred of desperate hope lingering in her eyes. Hoping beyond hope that all of this was truly a paranormal phenomenon, a supernatural occurrence. Hoping that the departed had genuinely returned from the dead, so that she wouldn't have to face the overwhelming weight of those concrete evidence files. Those bank transfer receipts, those sworn testimonies. I smiled. Tomorrow. She gasped in sheer shock. Tomorrow, when you publicly confess, I'll let you know. Inky collapsed back onto the floor, while I stood tall right in front of her. She suddenly lunged forward, grabbing desperately at the cuffs of my pants. Lu Baimu, Brother Mu, I'm begging you. These things cannot be allowed to leak out to the public. She raised her head to look up at me, her face smeared in a messy blend of tears and snot. I have an elderly mother to support above and a young child below. My mother is already over 70 years old, and my son is only 18. I lower my head to look down at her. Didn't Lao Li have an elderly mother and young children? Her hands trembled violently. Didn't Brother Lu have anyone? His daughter had just gotten accepted into university that very year. Her lips twitched uncontrollably. Didn't the janitor have anyone? His newborn grandchild had just come into this world. She let go of my pants, collapsing completely onto the floor. Wang's young son had just started elementary school, didn't you know? She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking in heavy, shuddering waves. I crouched down so we were eye to eye. You're begging me now, but when you murdered Lao Li, did you ever think about his family? When you made Brother Lu fall down the stairwell, did you think about his daughter? When you made the janitor suffer a fatal electric shock, did you think about his newborn grandchild? When you pushed Wang to work 16 consecutive hours of overtime, did you think about his young son? She covered her face, too terrified to meet my gaze. I stood back up. If you want to settle this privately, you can. She abruptly whipped her head up, a fleeting spark of hope flashing in her eyes. First, tomorrow morning, go turn yourself in at the police station. If I'm the one who reports you, it'll be a very different story from surrendering yourself. Her face turned deathly pale. Second, write a comprehensive, detailed confession regarding the company's systematic exploitation of employees over the past few years. Sign it with your fingerprint and issue a public apology. Her lips quivered. Third, go in person to the homes of Wang's family to apologize and pay out the maximum possible amount of compensation. She muttered helplessly. Fourth, I paused for a brief second. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp, inside the main conference room, issue a public confession before the entire company. She collapsed back down as if every ounce of strength had been drained from her body, slumped right on the floor. Lu Baimu, well, do you agree or not? I turned around and began walking toward the exit. Lu Baimu. She called out to me. I spun my head back. She was kneeling flat on the floor, her entire body shivering uncontrollably. I agree. I stared at her for 3 seconds. Very well. See you tomorrow. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the desolate, empty hallway. I walked up to the elevator bank and pressed the down button. The elevator began rising from the first floor, when suddenly footsteps echoed from behind me. I turned around to see Yin Kui bolting out from her office, running like a madwoman straight toward the stairwell. I stood completely still, not moving an inch. She rushed up to the stairwell door, shoving it violently open, only to instantly freeze in her tracks, her entire body stiffening as if nailed to the floor. I slowly walked forward, stepping up right behind her. She stood before the stairwell entrance, shivering like a leaf in the wind. I peered past her into the stairwell. Lao Li was standing right there on the steps, wearing the exact blue uniform he had worn on the day he passed away, his complexion bone-white, his dead eyes staring unblinkingly straight at Yin Kui. Right beside him stood Brother Lu, and further down stood the janitor, his hands still frozen in the exact posture from when he suffered his electric shock. At the very bottom stood Wang, his face dyed a ghastly shade of blue, for pale, ghostly faces, for pairs of lifeless eyes, all of them locked onto Yin Kui. A blood-curdling, horrific scream echoed through the entire floor, as she violently threw her head back, collapsing flat onto the floor with her eyes rolling backward, frothing profusely at the mouth. I looked down at her, then raised my head. Lao Li and the others had vanished in a thin air. Lao Hu. The next morning at 8:30 a.m., when I arrived at the grand conference room, the interior was already packed to the brim. The accountant was sitting in the front row, waving his hand at me. Baimu, over here. I walked over and took my seat. He grabbed my hand. His palms were drenched in cold sweat. I'm literally dying of suspense here. Is she actually going to show up? I glanced up toward the podium. She'll be here. At 8:45 a.m., Brother Wang. from administration walked in carrying a thick stack of documents, handing them out to everyone one by one. This is today's agenda. Everyone take a look. I accepted a copy and glanced through it. Item 1. Inky issues a public apology. Item 2. Employee QA session. Item 3 left blank. Brother Wong winked at me. Some people were whispering and murmuring among themselves. I never would have imagined Inkai would actually have to confess her faults in front of everyone. That's not a confession, that's an apology. What's the difference? A confession is what you tell the police. An apology is what you say to us. There's a massive difference. A confession means facing prison time. An apology doesn't. So is she actually going to face any legal ruling? At 9 a.m. sharp, the door swung open, and Inkai stepped inside. She wore a slightly rumpled suit, her hair a complete mess, while the conference room plunged into dead silence. She kept her head bowed as she took slow, heavy steps up to the podium. Respected colleagues, today I'm standing right here to issue an apology. I know that merely saying the words "I'm sorry" isn't enough, but I still need to say them. Down in the audience, someone sharply sucked in a cold breath of air. 3 years ago, the night Lowly passed away, it was me who had someone tamper with his tea. Her voice began to tremble. Lowly had more seniority than I did, and the person slated for the promotion next was undoubtedly him. I couldn't bear the thought of him blocking my path. She paused, panting heavily. I thought I had covered my tracks so perfectly that no one would ever find out. But right before he passed away, he called me. I ignored his call. He sent me a text message. I refused to reply. The final message he sent was a voice recording, pleading, "Inkai, please stop this. I still have a young child to feed. I won't fight you for the position anymore." Someone down in the audience began to softly sob. Inkai's voice began to shake even harder. The night Brother Liu fell down the stairwell. It was me who had someone sabotage the lights in the stairwell. He discovered that I was embezzling company commissions and threatened to report me. I was left with no other choice. I truly had no other choice. Her voice grew increasingly shaky. The janitor, he accidentally caught me, and the supplier secretly splitting kickbacks. So I had someone meddle with the power outlet in the break room. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shuddering violently. Wong, as she choked out those 2 words. Her entire body trembled uncontrollably. Wong had heart disease. I knew it. I had already looked at his health report, yet I still forced him to work overtime for an entire week. Consecutive overtime shifts of 16 hours a day until he passed away. When he died, I was at the hospital. I kept telling myself that his death had nothing to do with me. She abruptly dropped to her knees, kneeling right there on the podium before everyone. I was wrong. I truly was wrong. The conference room fell dead silent, broken only by the sound of her sobbing and a few occasional sniffles. She remained on her knees for a long, long time, so long that people began to murmur. She must actually be feeling remorse this time. Who knows? Maybe she's just putting on an act. Can you even fake a performance like that? She slowly pulled herself up, clutching the edge of the podium as she panted heavily, then turned her gaze toward me. Liu Baimu. I stood up. Now, you should finally tell me the truth. Every single person in the room locked their eyes onto me. I walked up to the podium and took the microphone from her hand. Hundreds of pairs of eyes down in the audience focused intently on me. I looked toward the front row of the technical department. Xiao Lu, if you would please stand up for a moment. Xiao Lu stood up, his face slightly flushed. That elevator malfunction the other day was engineered by Xiao Lu. He studied electrical engineering and hacked into the elevator system over the course of 3 days. The conference room fell silent for a single second before erupting into absolute chaos. What? The elevator system was hacked. Xiao Lu scratched his head, telling everyone around him. I just couldn't stand the sight of her anymore. Someone burst out laughing. Brother Wong from administration also stood up for a moment. Brother Wong rose to his feet with a slightly embarrassed smile. Those handprints on the window were made by him while Inky wasn't paying attention, using a mixture of glycerin and starch. Once it dried, it naturally appeared out of nowhere. And what about the accountant? The accountant stood up, lifting one leg into the air. That trail of wet footprints, from when the 2 of them were inside the break room. I slipped in through the back door, wearing wet shoes, and left them behind. He shook the shoes on his feet. My shoes are still soaked right now. The audience burst into a roaring wave of laughter as one person after another stood up. Over 10 people from the tech department, the administrative department, the accounting department, a janitorial staff, and security. In Kai stood frozen on the podium, her mouth gaping open in utter disbelief, her eyes bulging wide as she stared, first at this person, then at the next. I turned my gaze toward her. Director Ian, did you really think I was the only one who despised you? She looked right back at me, speechless and stunned. Lowly was my mentor. He was the one who taught me the ropes of his trade, took me out to eat, and even advanced me my very first month's salary. Brother Lou was the one who guided me when I first started. Back when I didn't even know how to use Excel, it was him who patiently taught me step by step. The janitor kept the lights on for me every single night, no matter how late I worked overtime. He kept those lights shining. And Wong, his young son, even called me uncle. I slowly swept my gaze across the audience. Those dozen-plus people stood there looking straight back at me. For the past 3 years, it hasn't just been me waiting for this moment. I enunciated every single word the entire department. I've been waiting for you. Inkoi's legs turned completely to jelly, forcing her to grip the podium just to keep from collapsing. The audience plunged into dead silence once more. A silence so heavy you could practically hear the sound of breathing. I turned around and stepped down from the podium, pausing just for a brief moment as I walked past her. Director Ian, you just said you came here to apologize. She remained silent. So, do you even know who you're supposed to apologize to? I turned my head and pointed out toward the audience. Not to me. To them. To Lao Li's family. To Brother Lou's daughter. To the janitor's granddaughter. And to Wong's son. Today, all of them are here. Her eyes widened in absolute shock. I looked out toward the doorway. Lao Li Sha. Wife stood up, her eye sockets red and swollen, though she shed no tears. Brother Lou's daughter stood up, a young college student in her early 20s, biting her lower lip tightly. The janitor's daughter stood up, wearing an electrician's uniform. Wang's wife stood up, holding the hand of her young son with a crew cut, who clutched a certificate of merit in his small hand. Inki's legs gave out entirely beneath her. She dropped to her knees, falling right onto the podium, facing the doorway to apologize. I'm sorry, she repeated over and over again, her voice growing increasingly faint, turning hoarse and raspy. No one uttered a single word, only her solitary voice echoed relentlessly through the conference room, until finally the little boy spoke up. Andy, the young boy called out in a soft voice. Inki lifted her head, her face completely drenched in tears. The little boy looked right down at her. My mom says even bad people know how to cry. Now that you're done crying, can you please bring my daddy back to me? Inside the conference room, many people had already broken down in tears. 3 months later, the final verdict was handed down. In Kai was sentenced to 25 years behind bars on multiple charges. Intentional homicide resulting in death. Instigating others to commit crimes. Embezzlement of company assets. And forced labor. On the day of the trial, every single person from our department showed up, sitting shoulder to shoulder in the public gallery, watching In Kai, the woman who had once acted so arrogant and tyrannical, now wearing a prison jumpsuit, standing inside the defendant's dock as the judge read out her sentence. She kept her head bowed the entire time. When it was over, she raised her head and looked out toward us. She saw me, and she saw Lao Li's wife, Brother Lou's daughter, the janitor's daughter, along with Wang's wife and young son. Her lips twitched helplessly, yet not a single word could escape her throat. Then, the bailiffs escorted her away. As we stepped outside the courthouse, the sunlight was blindingly bright. Xiao Lu walked over and handed me a bottle of water. I'm not thirsty, but I'll take it. I held it in my hand. 25 years is more than enough for her to get a taste of her own medicine. Whether it's enough or not depends on how she survives in there. He chuckled lightly. Do you think she'll run into Lao Li and the others in there? I shot him a side glance. Do you want to go in there with her? He frantically waved his hands. The accountant rushed up from behind us. Baimu, let's go grab dinner tonight, my treat. Your treat? What are we celebrating? Celebrating justice, of course. Inki got what she deserved. How can we not celebrate? Brother Wong from administration hurried over as well. That's right. Let's celebrate. I'll make a reservation. Brother Lu's daughter walked over and stopped right in front of me. Uncle Mu. I looked down at the young girl. About my dad's case. Thank you so much. You don't need to thank me. Thank yourself instead. I smiled gently. You got accepted into university, and your dad would be the proudest person in the world. This is the absolute best reply you could ever give him. The young girl's eye sockets turned red and swollen. The janitor's daughter also walked over. Brother Mu, I found a job. Where? At an asset management company. I smiled faintly. That's wonderful. Your dad would be so proud. Uncle, look at this. I got this. I squatted down to look at the little boy. Does her mom know? She knows. She said she's going to frame it. I smiled. Tell her for me. Then I'll come visit you two in a few days. Okay. The little boy hopped and skipped back to his mother's side. Lao Li's husband stood a short distance away, not coming over, but he looked right at me and nodded. I nodded back. That was more than enough. The next day during lunch, the accountant suddenly strolled over, lowering his voice to ask me, I've always wanted to ask you something. What is it? Xiao Lu scratched his head. Wasn't Yin Kai an externally appointed director? She didn't even work at this company before. Why on earth would she harm Lao Li and the others? I looked at him as the others crowded around. That's right. I don't get it either. Wasn't she a newcomer? What kind of deep grudge could she possibly have against Lao Li and the rest? I smiled softly. Why do you think she managed to secure that promotion? They gasped in shock. 3 years ago, before she was transferred away, she was already a manager. Lao Li and the others were blocking her path back then, so she got transferred to another branch. But she never stopped looking for a way back. This latest appointment was just a setup for her to return and continue climbing. Ever higher. The accountant sharply sucked in a cold breath of air. So she committed all those heinous crimes back when she wasn't even the top boss yet? That's right. She only got promoted afterward. Then, wasn't she terrified of getting caught? Of course she was. That's why she had to request a transfer, waiting for the heat to die down before crawling back. Xiao Lu chimed in again. Then why didn't they just directly fire you guys? If they fired you guys, there wouldn't be anyone left to work overtime, and no one else would keep running into accidents either. I looked straight at him. Are you an idiot? He froze in place. Whether I was here or not, someone would always have to play this role. They needed someone to take the blame. Needed a corporate legend that working overtime brings fatal curses. All to cover up the real culprit. They fell silent, lingering in a heavy hush. Xiao Lu held it in for a long moment, before finally blurting out, You are way too terrifyingly deep. I shot him a side glance. Deep? How is that deep? The accountant laughed. Well, what about you guys? You guys played along with my whole act. Aren't you even deeper? They froze in shock. We're different. We genuinely couldn't stand the sight of her. I chuckled softly without saying a word, gazing down at the bustling stream of people passing by below, the heavy traffic flowing endlessly, and smiled faintly. Half a year later, I transferred to a brand new company, where nobody knew a single thing about my past, and no one had ever heard of the terrifying legend that working overtime brings fatal curses. The new boss was incredibly gentle and kind, never once forcing anyone to work overtime. Whenever I occasionally worked late into the evening, I would stand by the window and look down. We still had a group chat named Waiting for Director Ian, and even though Director Ian was already behind bars, we never bothered to change the group name. Xiao Lu said the name held a profound commemorative meaning. On New Year's Eve, I stayed home by myself, cooking a hot pot of chive and egg dumplings. Outside the window, people were setting off brilliant fireworks. My phone suddenly chimed. Someone in the group chat was sending red envelopes. I smiled gently and sent one out as well, tapping it open. Happy New Year! My phone rang once more. It was a video call sent by Wang's young son. The little boy stood right outside his new front door, holding up a certificate of merit. Uncle, Happy New Year! The certificate read, Outstanding Student Cadre. In the background, his mother was busy wrapping dumplings. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Happy New Year.